Welcome everyone. It's really great that you can join us here today for our first webinar of the winter that our organization here, our liaison committee with the academics and PIBC is hosting. My name is Mark Holland. I'll be your MC here today. I'm a planner and a professor at Vancouver Island University, and I chair this PIBC Academic Liaison Committee, which its role is to connect all of the four main schools in planning in BC, UNBC, SFU, UBC, and Vancouver Island University, and liaise with PIBC and help the schools kind of be connected and stay more connected to each other. We meet monthly. We've got student reps from each of the schools. They're great discussions or sharing information. And one of the things that we've been wanting to do more of is to begin to try and get everybody connected. We've made the observations that, you're all the next generation of planners. Each of the schools is unique, and there's almost no opportunities other than occasional expensive conferences for you to touch base with each other. So we're trying to get a little more of that going. Before we get started, I'll just make the observation that wherever you are here in BC, we're on one of the ancestral territories of the nearly 200 First Nations here in BC, and we acknowledge that history. We acknowledge our inheritance of that history and the responsibilities that come to all of us in an era of reconciliation. This time of the year is interesting for students. You're heading into final, you've got a whole lot of things that are due here imminently now or very shortly. So there's always the pressure and stress of that. For those of you that have major capstone project or theses, certainly our entire school, everyone does a thesis. So the second years are all grinding through that one because we're beating them like rented mules to get that stuff ready and get the first draft to us by Christmas or shortly thereafter. So huge pieces of work and policy analysis required for that. And so everybody's got all of these loads on it. And then sitting in the back of your mind or in the front of your mind is an observation that your bank account is pretty much long gone empty and the student loans are going to be running out shortly. And you're really hoping you're going to get a job here fairly soon. So that's sort of what we wanted to do today, is to begin to start on-ramping that. We'll do another session probably in the spring, in a few months, on getting a job and see if we can find. Last year we brought in 4 or 5 different planners who hire planners in several different sectors of the economy. We'll see what we can do to get some more available this year so that we'll have another session and you can kind of hear what they're looking for and recommendations on that intense push to get your applications in and get into Pile A and get interviewed and get the job. Today, we're going to look a step back a little bit and kind of engage the discussion for planners of all different years in your education about sort of what the future may hold as a planner as you get your career started. So we're really, really fortunate to have 5 different graduates of the 4 different schools come forward and volunteer today to give you just sort of a bit of a story of what their start of their career is. All of them have graduated in the last couple of years and are now out working in quite a diversity of areas across BC and different fields. So today we've got Peyton Carter. She's a graduate of UNBC in Prince George, and she's now working with the Nanaimo planning department. She got tired of being cold and decided to come down to where it's a lot warmer, albeit wetter. Molly Blower, someone who I had the privilege of supervising her thesis. She's a graduate of VIU. She now works for City Spaces as a development manager for nonprofit housing projects in the Lower Mainland. Maya Molander, she's a graduate at SFU and now works as a regional planner for the First Nations Health Authority. Elsa Foray is a graduate of UBC and she's now working for BC Housing. And Sam Hadfield is a graduate of UNBC and he now works as a planner in Terrace. Looking forward to the snow. So lots of different fields. They come from different schools. All of you who have explored the schools, probably when you were thinking of applying to school and looking at them, note that they're all actually quite different. One of the programs is an undergrad, the other 3 are graduate, but all of them take very, very different they have different faculty and different priorities in what they teach. So we're all coming from different points of view. Each of our great guests here is going to spend 5 or 10 minutes and just maybe give you a little bit of a sense of who they are, and what they studied in school and what that transition was like into getting to work and what their sort of thoughts are about planning school, about getting a job, and about your early career and your job here as they've gotten started. So we've got 5 of them and they'll each take 5 to 10 minutes and then we'll have some questions after that. So if you want to have a chat, you can have a chat with each other in the chat box. as we go. And otherwise, we'll probably try and keep most of the questions near to the end. Otherwise, it may take us, we may never actually get there to the end. So we'll try and keep them focused at the end. And we're going to start off with Peyton. So Peyton, you want to lead our group here, and then Molly will come after you, and you get started in just sort of 5 to 10 minutes on who you are, what you studied, and what this path to your career has been like. Thanks
Sure.
so much.
I was worried you were going to make me go first. Hi, everybody. As Mark mentioned, I am right now a planner with the city of Nanaimo, and I was a graduate of the UMBC School of what was at the time environmental planning in December of 2021. So I crossed paths with Sam a little bit and Dr. Graham as well. And I think when I originally discovered planning, I had my mindset on being an architect, but I really wasn't that good at math or physics. So planning seems like a really good alternative. I think planning is very unique because not a lot of people know what it is. So I think that makes getting jobs a little bit easier, but also, I don't think you totally realize the impact you have on your community. So I graduated in 2021 with a bachelor's degree in environmental planning, with a major in First Nations planning and a minor in political science. And then I also picked up a certificate in Aboriginal community resource planning and local government administration with a specialization in planning and economic development. So I really branched out and tried a little bit of everything that UMBC had to offer. Hopefully there's some of you on the call. And I think it's worth noting, I didn't pick up those certificates until I was in almost my last semester of school. So it's not too late to pick up those extra certificates that will really help you set yourself apart. I started in local government when I was really young, actually. I think I was about 13, and I was working in recreation and parks. And ultimately, that really helped set me up for getting my first planning job, which was a planning technician with the regional district of Nanaimo. And that's because I was actually able to apply internally. So if you have a background in recreation and parks or lifeguarding or teaching skating lessons or anything like that, and you're working with a municipality, I think that that's really beneficial. After that, I was on that job for a year under a temporary contract. And then I applied with the city of Nanaimo and got a job as a planning assistant. So not necessarily a planner in that role, but supporting small applications like variances and general inquiries at the front counter. And this past May, I was promoted to a planner position when that job came up internally as well. So there's something to be said, I think, for getting in with your local municipality or wherever you're living and recognizing that planning pulls from so many other departments and being able to link with those departments is super important. What else can I say? I think some stuff I've noticed so far along the way is really your degree will get you in the door, but it's who you are and what sets you apart from other people that's going to land you that job. So I think of VIU also being a planner at the city, where you're all going to graduate with that same degree, and you have to find ways to set yourself apart from other students in your class. Because when my manager sees a resume, she sees 20 graduates from the same school, but she's really looking for what makes you unique as compared to your colleagues. So I think those are the things I've really pulled on since getting into planning and recognizing that competition is intense and you have to find ways to set yourself apart, and don't be afraid to try other realms of planning as well. I think I've done regional district planning and I've also done municipal planning, and there's pros and cons to each, and you get to have your fingers in all pieces of the pie, which I think is beneficial as well. But yeah, I think honing in on those transferable skills and making sure that you're diversifying your resume as compared to your applicants is something that's really helped me advance my career so far. I've only been in the professional field for just over 2 years, and I've already had 3 separate roles. So don't be afraid to try new things.
That's great, Peyton. Thanks so much. I've got a whole bunch of questions I'll ask, but we'll save them to the end because it's an interesting story that you tell. I also
Yeah.
thought I was going to go be an architect too. Then all of my architecture friends were on antidepressive meds after they'd graduated, so I decided to go into planning instead. We're a cheerier bunch. Okay, so let's go to Molly, and then after that we'll go to Maya. Molly, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Peyton. That was great to listen to. It's also so neat to see the MCP lab over there. It's been a while, so it's looking familiar. Hi, again, my name is Molly Blower. I live in Vancouver, and I'm a development manager with City Spaces Consulting Services. It was just before the end of my first semester. I had lined myself up with a city job with City of West Kelowna. I was feeling pretty good about it. I was stoked, and then COVID hit, and all of the funding for those roles got pulled, and my job was immediately canceled. So I had to pivot a little bit, which was an interesting start to my career. But luckily, a friend in my planning program pointed me in the direction of a sole proprietor in Victoria. His name is Dean, and he is a development consultant, and she thought I would be a good fit with him. So I went and met Dean, and I knew that I wanted to try private sector development. I had always been interested in trying both private and public. And so I took the opportunity, and I was immediately exposed to a wide array of projects. Dean, Mark is nodding because he does everything from affordable housing to marina planning to haul out facilities. It's wild what that man does, but it was such an amazing opportunity. I quickly realized that affordable housing was what piqued my interest out of his profile or portfolio, I should say. And so I knew that's the direction I probably would want to go in, but I ended up staying with Dean for over a year. Eventually I had to move off the island for my partner's career, so I ended up in Vancouver. But I stayed connected with Dean, and then through Dean, he actually said that there's an opportunity with City Spaces Consulting in Vancouver for a development coordinator position, and he thought that I would be a great fit. So he linked me up with them, and I quickly got hired on. And now, more than 2 years later, here we are. I started as a development coordinator and worked up to leading projects as a development manager. I absolutely love the work I do. It's a very fast-paced environment. I work with some mostly incredible clients, and I work on some really meaningful projects that are helping to address the housing crisis across Western Canada and the territories. So that's where I am today. I think maybe some tips that helped me out over the last couple of years. Like I mentioned, my network played a huge role in the opportunities that I've been provided. So both my colleagues at planning school and then also professionals afterwards as well. A strong reference or even an informal polite comment at a conference goes a long way. And so don't take those for granted. I think also being open to opportunities. As I mentioned, I never thought I would be a marina planner. That was never what I wanted to do. But there were actually quite a few transferable skills through those experiences. And so that was helpful as well. I think also advocating for yourself. I think as a consultant, you're not only pitching your services to your clients, but my company in particular, we're pretty small. We're all hands on deck, heads are down. And if I'm not advocating for myself and the work that I do, I don't think I would see the growth that I've seen in the past couple of years. And then selecting a company that aligns with your values and your professional goals. City Spaces, I know this sounds cliche, but they really are a truly wonderful group of people. I think everyone there has aligned values, and because of that, the culture is so fantastic, and it's been an amazing experience with supportive coworkers and leadership as well. So that's been really important. And I think I'll leave it there for now. Thanks.
Molly, that's great. Yes, you and you didn't mention your family moment there as you got out of school. I remember working hard to get you through your defense on that one. Molly became a mother within days of having defended her thesis. Okay, so moving forward, Maya, let's move to you, and then we'll have El Sabi, and finally Sam will finish us off here. So over to you, Maya.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. And just want to check that my audio is okay. Perfect. All right. So yeah, thank you so much, Mark, for inviting me to join this panel today. Really excited to be here. My name is Maya Molander, joining today from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. I graduated from the SFU Masters of Resource and Environmental Management Planning program last summer in August. And literally a few hours after my defense, I received a call with a job offer to join the First Nations Health Authority as a regional planner. So for those of you who might not be familiar with the First Nations Health Authority, or FNHA, it is the first province-wide health authority of its kind in Canada, and it's part of a unique BC First Nations health governance structure that works in partnership with BC First Nations to achieve better health and well-being outcomes for First Nations and Aboriginal people in the province. And as an organization, we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary this year. And similar to the provincial health authority structure, it's divided by the 5 regional health authorities. So there's Vancouver Coastal, Fraser Salish, Interior, Northern, and Vancouver Island. And so I was hired as the regional planner for the Fraser Salish region, which serves 32 First Nations communities all the way from Tsawwassen up the Fraser Canyon to Boothroyd. And as a regional planner, I wore many different hats. Part of my work was internal facing, operational and organizational planning, working with all the various regional teams and supporting them with their work planning and reporting. And then another part of my job was community facing and working directly with the communities, supporting them with their the development of their community health and wellness plans. And yeah, it continues to be a daily learning experience for me, but when I got started, it was a steep learning curve for me. It was my first planning job, and I was the only planner in the region. I was also working for a health authority, and I had 0 experience working in the health field, and I never foresaw myself working in the health field. And then on top of this, I did have experience working with First Nations, but I wasn't familiar with the BC First Nations health governance structure, and I'm also not Indigenous. And so coming into the position, I was tremendously nervous, but I was honest about my trepidations in the interview, and for whatever reason, they decided to give me a shot. So I'm forever grateful for that because of the incredible learning opportunities that I've had. And I'm actually in a new position now as a senior specialist in the community development team, which is part of the provincial team. And I made this switch because as regional planner, I realized the aspects of planning that really resonated with me and that I really loved. And those pieces of planning were the community, was working with community and community planning. And so I realized that I enjoyed facilitating engagement sessions. I enjoyed demystifying the planning process, creating tools and resources, and just meeting communities where they're at, and providing kind of as much or as little support as they wanted in whatever format that might look like to them. So yeah, I've learned a lot through the journey so far, and one of them that I continue kind of to reflect on is that you don't need to be a subject matter expert on a lot of the topics that might be discussed. And so it certainly helps to do any prior research you can, because it shows that you care. But it's really about coming in with an open mind and an open heart and being able to listen to what's being said and what's being emphasized. Coming in with that planning perspective and thinking about who's in the room, who's not in the room, being curious, thinking critically, identifying gaps and potential barriers, making connections, looping in the right and appropriate contacts, and being solutions oriented and mapping out a path forward that's really honoring what's being said in that room. And so what I've started to do after an engagement or a meeting, is I would kind of do like a what I heard exercise. And so on top of the meeting minutes, I would kind of look at the meeting minutes and then think about everything I just heard and try to visualize that in a different type of format that would work for me. And so I would think about, you know, what was said and what was the purpose of that meeting? What were some of the needs that I was hearing? Some of the gaps? Where are we now? And where do we want to go? So what, if any, goals were identified? And what are some of those actionable key tasks that were mentioned, and fleshing out those specific key tasks and actions, and kind of putting a timeline to that. And then thinking about, how can I visualize that in a format that's going to resonate and land with community? And so I get to be a little bit creative in that regard as well. And yeah, I really love the work that I do. It's tremendously meaningful work, and I have the privilege of working alongside some really incredible people and leaders who all have a collective interest in working towards improving health outcomes for First Nations peoples and communities. And so that's incredible. We're able to weave cultural safety and humility and anti-racism work throughout everything we do. And I get to have everyday conversations about decolonization and transformation. And so, yeah, I'm tremendously grateful. If I have any words of advice, it's to be kind and patient with yourself, and that the planning process is not linear. So it can go in all sorts of different ways, and you may have to wear many different hats, but echoing kind of the thoughts of Peyton and Molly for some of their advice as well. And to put yourself out there, apply to all sorts of different planning jobs. It's an incredible field to be in right now. There are so many diverse planning positions, and so don't be afraid. And yeah, always happy to chat. So thank you.
Samaya, that's fantastic. That's really great. Very interesting observations you have about how unstructured our lives actually are as planners sometimes. We're very thoughtful, very insightful. That's fantastic. Okay, let's move on to Elsabe. Elsabe, you want to take us forward, and then Sam will finish up the row here, please.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. I'm Elsabe. And thanks for Peyton, Molly, and Maya for starting us off there. As I was listening, I was just thinking, you know, we're all in different roles, but it seems like there's some common threads that are emerging through those conversations, which is, it's reassuring to hear sometimes, and it's nice to be here and to connect with everyone. I'm phoning in from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. And to kick things off, I guess a little bit about me. I graduated from UBC with an undergraduate degree in human geography, and through that kind of heard about SCARP, the School of Community and Regional Planning. So made that transition over to SCARP for graduate school. And I've been working with BC Housing as a development manager, currently a development manager, but with BC Housing since 2020. And similarly have kind of worn, you know, a few different hats throughout that process. So I'm working with the Vancouver Island region team right now, and that sits within our development strategies branch. So I'm responsible for a portfolio of projects across the island as well as the Gulf Islands. And that's kind of what I do day to day. But starting off, I guess, a little bit with my early career and how I got here. Molly, I heard you talk about the COVID pandemic and that kind of derailing things. Similar to me, I was originally going to do a co-op position with BC Housing. I think my first day was March 16th of 2020. So within days of, you know, starting that position, I got the call, and it was, you know, we're transitioning to working from home. It's a really big shift. We kind of have to put a pause on this co-op position for now, but we'll be in touch. And it was kind of left there. SCARP has a internship component as a part of the degree, and a lot of folks end up doing that between first and second year. So I found myself kind of back to square zero. I was going to say square one, but kind of back to the beginning to figure out what that would look like. And so I applied for a contract with the City of Vancouver to do some engagement materials with their Shape Your City initiative. And then as I was doing that, I had also gotten kind of a call back from BC Housing. They were redeploying staff to assist with the temporary rent supplement program that was administered throughout COVID. And that was offering rent supplements to different households, whether it was individuals or families, between $300 and $500 a month from March to August. So I did both. It was definitely a very busy kind of time period, but that kind of got my foot in the door at BC Housing. It was with our operations team, so it wasn't directly with the branch that I was originally going to do my co-op with. And it was more of a data entry role, so it didn't it didn't really align with, I guess, the planning that I was hoping to do. But partway through my second year, I reconnected with the original director that I was going to work with and kind of started up that co-op position that I was going to do a year prior. So I worked with the provincial redevelopment team as an administrative coordinator for a year. And then from there, began working as a senior project officer, delivering a portfolio of group homes. So I was working with, health authorities, with CLBC, community living, MCFD, and so forth. And then earlier in the summer, I transitioned over to a development manager role. And so my day-to-day is working on those projects, different funding programs, different partners, different communities, and so forth across the island region. So at the moment, I have about, I'd say 12 to 15 projects, all in various stages of development. And that's from initiation through to planning, design, construction, and then we hand it over to our operations team once we obtain occupancy. I guess words of wisdom or things that if I could rewind a few years and tell like early Elsabe about my career, I think curiosity and having that curiosity is really important. And for my entire first year, I would say, I would just try to absorb as much as I could. And so oftentimes you're sitting in those meetings, maybe not playing a direct role in the decisions that are being made, but there's a lot of soft skills that you learn through that. Managing teams, managing conflicts, decisions, and so forth, and just observing different styles of leadership. There's also technical conversations that happen in those meetings with the architects and the consultants and so forth, and just, absorbing that as you transition into your career. There's, financial discussions. I think that was maybe one of my weaknesses when I first started out. Performas, capital budgets, operating budgets, all that kind of good stuff. So just really absorbing that. And then I would take those, and during my one-on-ones with my director and kind of my internal team, I would ask those questions as well as, how does that piece fit into that part of the conversation, and having that curiosity and not being afraid to ask those questions. Now that I'm in more of a direct delivery role, I do that all the time with my consultants as well, because there's no way that you can be a subject matter on everything. As an example, currently one of my projects, we're working to start construction in the spring. It's on one of the Gulf Islands, so there's a big challenge with water, and I'm becoming very quickly very knowledgeable about salty water because that's what I'm working with every day. As we're trying to figure out, how are we gonna get water to this project? And I'm not a environmental planner or resource planner or anything like that, but I'm asking those questions to my team and opening myself up to that vulnerability a little bit of, I don't know what to do here. What are you recommending? And kind of what does that look like? And kind of tied to that, I'd say a second thing I could tell myself if I was earlier on in my career is that curiosity and those questions, it really starts to help build your toolkit as a planner, both the soft and the hard kind of skills as you work through that. And whichever area of planning you end up going into, there will always be things that you're still learning and that you're still familiarizing yourself with. And then I guess just keep connecting is the last piece. I just attended the Housing Central Conference that's in Vancouver over the past 2 days. So that's a really great way to connect with some of the societies that I'm working with, nonprofits, municipal counterparts, things like that, and just meeting folks in more casual settings. There's also, events like these where you start to connect with other industry professionals, and it really is a small field. And you can hear just kind of from some of those common themes and threads that are emerging that a lot of the work that we do, even though it's different, it's very similar. And sometimes when you're, bogged down by the emails and you're like, oh, this is just, how am I going to deal with this? It helps to have someone that you can connect to and kind of just recharge, refresh, bounce ideas off of. Maybe they've gone through a similar situation on their projects and stuff like that. So just keep connecting and keep building that network as well. But yeah, I'll probably leave it there. Those are, my pieces.
Elsabe, that's great. Thanks so much. Very, very, COVID. A couple of you guys got hit by COVID. You're the COVID generation. There will probably never be another generation in planning in our lifetimes that had that moment in time as it hit you. Very, very interesting. Great advice. Okay, Sam, over to you to finish off our first year start of the discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Before I start, I'll say I'm coming to you from the unceded territory of the Tsimshian peoples. But I'm Sam Hadfield. I'm a planner one working at the City of Terrace. I finished my planning undergrad in May at UNBC, and directly after I moved right here to Terrace in June. My major was a northern and rural community planning, and I had a pretty roundabout path into planning in general. When I first took my first 100 level planning class, I was a second year psychology student. And by the end of that semester, I had been tricked into becoming a low level bureaucrat. I changed my major pretty shortly after, and I'm pretty new to my position. I've been in at the City of Terrace as a official planner for about 6 months now. So maybe I'll try to stick to my experiences, just because, talking about overall trends is probably that's not where my I don't have that bulk of experiences that the other speakers have, and I think they've done a great job of communicating the learnings that come from that. In terms of stuff I wish I knew about, like transitioning from school to work, for me, the short story is that by doing an internship, I had a really smooth and natural transition from school to work. My last year, I was doing studies part-time and doing a remote internship for the city alongside of school. It wasn't actually technically a land use planning internship. I was a sustainability intern that was helping the department with helping the planning department develop the city's climate adaptation plan. But as a part of that, I guess one of the things I'd say is, like, kind of be open to, planning is such a wide, it encompasses so many activities that maybe when you're looking for opportunities and work experience, don't be so laser focused on like land use or a planning, like, sort of related title, because it can overlap. So I was a sustainability intern, but I was doing a lot of the same stuff that frankly I have to do on a daily basis as a planner one today. I was reviewing city plans and policy. I was researching funding opportunities, organizing meetings with senior staff and community stakeholders, and I was writing reports to council. So, and I liked what Elsie said about those, like, soft skills of just, like, that you get familiarity with just sitting in meetings, just being in these contexts. Like, that was incredibly valuable for me in my internship, and I think helped me avoid some stumbles along the way in my position now. I was also able to kind of, as a part of that, interface with the planning team and kind of get a good sense of, like, what I was a fourth year planner going into my fifth year when I started that internship in May of last year, and it was supposed to be a 4-month internship. It got extended into a 6 or a 7, and then it eventually led into a job interview. So I got to be, like, pretty or a job opportunity rather. I didn't technically have to interview, and so that's kind of the value of building a network without having to actually like network at a conference or whatnot. I don't have that conference networking gene or whatever it is built into you, where you always have some conversational topic ready to go. But I found that working in a team and being able to build those connections is really, really helpful for accomplishing some of that same stuff at the end of the day. Though maybe not casting as wide of a net, but clearly I was able to make some solid connections because it led into the position that I have today. What was I trying to get at? Just that I was able to kind of pick planners' brains as a part of that closeness, and kind of understand, like, in my final year of studies, what should I actually be focusing on in terms of, like, skills to so that when I am out in the job market, I'm performing in interviews, I'm how can I learn from the team's early mistakes that they made. And a big part of that was confidence, comfortability in these job interviews, because that's such a key window. But also something that maybe was not a huge focus of my studies, which is like just really having a good amount of experience interpreting and applying bylaws. Like that is such a big part of my job as a municipal planner, and probably only something that maybe 1-2 of my planning classes had me like really actively doing. And so that is a big takeaway. I'll have you any planning students that are like kind of aiming for municipal work, definitely like just like reading through, getting to grips with the zoning bylaw, maybe even picking a little plot in your city and asking yourself, how big can I build a shed in the backyard? Like working through that. Sometimes it's half of my day working through those kinds of inquiries. So that's valuable. That's your experience as well, Peyton. Nice. In terms of yeah, maybe some more reflections on life in municipal planning. Kind of coming in, I was pretty sure that either the municipal or the provincial space is where I wanted to end up. And I'm very happy with I think that I had the right idea, and I'm pretty happy with the environment I'm in. The planning team here in Terrace. Another benefit of that internship was that you get to like kind of scope out these workplaces and understand like where, like, is this a supportive learning environment, and like is this a place I can really like see a start. And for Terrace, that was definitely the case. You know, I'd always heard that there was a lot of on-the-job learning early in your planning career, and that can be pretty kind of a daunting prospect. You know, you in planning seem to always have to, you're always starting from square one, and you can't be a subject matter expert in everything, like someone said. That really resonated with me. But in terms of like fitting with municipal planning, when I was in my studies and my courses, I always found it really easy to get interested in, invested in like different projects. Like didn't matter if it was like what the class's topic was. But at the same time, I was never really lasered in on what my specific interest was. You know, I was seeing all my peers like be like, oh, I'm incredibly interested in transportation. I want to be a transportation planner, or parks, or housing, or like social equity. That's really what that's what like lights a fire in me, and that's what I want to do. And I didn't have that feeling. It kind of felt like I was in Harry Potter. The sorting hat is sorting everyone off into these houses, and it's sitting on my head and it's not saying anything, and I'm freaking out. But the good news is that if you kind of feel similarly to how I did, municipal planning, from my perspective, seems to be a really good fit. Partly because you have to be very flexible in the work that you're going to take on, and the fact that you're going to be starting from square zero over and over again, because you have pretty limited control over what is coming into the planning pipeline. Like that's really in terms of like long range projects, that can be really, really influenced by council priorities and your department's history overall. But and I'll say that this is coming from the context of a small city. You know, Terrace is about 12,000, maybe up to 16 if you expand the scope a little bit, people. And so in a small city, you're not just the transportation person. You're wearing a lot of hats on any given day. You could be fielding inquiries, processing signed permit applications in the morning, and then going off to lead like a big climate adaptation plan meeting right after lunch. And that can be kind of a jarring feeling of juggling all these different things. And with a small team, you are, as a team, juggling a lot of different things. And sometimes that can feel, in terms of maybe shifting to the cons. So, you know, what's potentially a deal breaker for municipal work, juggling all that stuff can be pretty overwhelming at times. If you hate that feeling of managing all your different class deadlines at once, I got bad news for municipal planning. That continues, absolutely. yeah, maybe like one final note is kind of that that maybe I wasn't the most aware of, is that in long range planning in these small municipalities, my experience is that when you're the project lead, when you're project managing, that kind of looks a little different than working on a project when you're in school. And that's probably an obvious statement. But for me, you know, I'm researching, I'm shaping, I'm organizing the creation of this plan, and I have a direct hand in it in that way. But for these smaller municipalities, we rely a lot on consultants for long range planning. And you know, that could be a pretty big drawback for some people if they really value that hands-on, if they want to be the person writing that final plan, right? Like, we're very involved in shaping, editing, creating, but in terms of having that that direct feeling of ownership, as you know, this is the plan that I wrote with my own hands, like that might be rare from what I can see. But with those cons in mind, I'll finish off by pointing out that the work-life balance in my position, and for similar, you know, like planner 1s, 2s, 3s in these smaller municipalities, seems to be really good. You know, you're able to show up at 8:30, be off by 4:30, leave your work at your desk, and you know, you're going to have some really hectic, busy days, but having space for your life outside of work and being able to address burnout and that kind of stuff is something I really value. And I think that a lot of workplaces in other spaces, private and otherwise, could definitely take a I don't know, there's something to learn from there. That's something I really value. But with that, I'll just wrap it up there.
Thanks, Sam. That's great, Sam. That was really quite thorough. Lots of great points there. And I see Molly grimacing as someone who works in the development sector. Work-life balance? What are you talking about? No such thing. Just before we go into discussions, just want to acknowledge, we've got a couple other folks here on the line. So Kelly Chan is our coordinator and manager and everything to us all in our committee, and is our key member liaison person. So Kelly, thanks for joining us and helping us set all this up and promote it. And my colleague Rylan Graham, also on our committee and a really, really key animateur at UNBC. Rylan, thanks so much. He's a major contributor to our planning and academic profession here. He's involved in so many things. So, and a really key, someone who pulls with our committee to make things happen. So Rylan, thanks for joining us here, fitting this into your schedule. Great. Okay, let's go to questions. Thank you all. This was just really fantastic. Really interesting points here, taking some notes on what you're all saying. Just got me smiling, remembering the start of my career, and just I hire and supervise young folks as well, and yeah, just a lot of really good wisdom that you all brought forward. So you can unmute and ask a question or put your hand up, or you can type a comment in the chat box here. We've got till 1:30. I don't know that we'll have enough time to talk. Who knows? We may get caught up in a whole lot of things. Let's see how this goes, but we can, as it begins to wind down, then we can always let folks go. And obviously some folks have had to leave for certain deadlines. So yeah, question. I'm gonna seed the question here just initially, and then folks can put up their hands or type in their questions there. Picking up from Sam's comments of what that was a fantastic image. The sorting hat was sitting there silent on my head. That's great. Some folks, if you, as Molly will attest, and all our colleagues here, I teach my students that if you're a transportation planner, you know you're a transportation planner. There's no question in your mind that's what you're about. There are a few other areas like that. Food systems is one, others. But I'm interested in the other folks. You didn't have a super strong sense, Sam, but some of the others, did you have a strong priority in what you were studying, and you really figured this was what I'm passionate about? I had a colleague when I was in school, and his obsession was chaos theory. So he did his master's thesis on chaos theory. Obviously not really, as Sam noted, really good preparation for being a municipal planner at the other end, other than comfort with chaos. But yeah, what were you all particularly really interested in, and how close is it connected to what you're doing now? And you don't have to answer, but I'll just throw that out there. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I was similar to Sam, where I didn't feel like I had particularly chosen my niche throughout planning school. Similar, had a lot of colleagues that were really into transportation planning or climate action policy, that sort of thing, but I didn't have that. And I actually ended up doing my thesis on urban resilience, which is quite a large topic, but was very important at the time of COVID, as you can imagine. But I think housing was a large factor in urban resilience that I read about. And again, through my experience with Dean, just began to really be interested in the field of housing planning. And so it wasn't until, I would say, both my thesis studies and then that first early work with the sole proprietor I worked for that I really found what I was wanting to do ultimately. So it took me a while as well, Sam. It's not just you.
That's great. That's excellent. How about anyone else? Peyton, Maya?
Yeah, I can comment on that too. Originally when I started at UMBC, I picked a major in Northern and Rural Community Planning. And then I lived in Prince George for a couple years and I was like, oh, I don't really know if Prince George is for me. No offense, Sam and Graham. But I knew I wanted to come back to the island where I was from. And I think during that time, reconciliation was really becoming a focus of UMBC, and a lot more programs and courses were being offered in there. So I actually switched my major from Northern and Rural Community Planning to First Nations Planning. I obviously didn't end up in First Nations Planning, but then after I graduated, I also was doing a temporary job with a energy advising firm, and also developed a really strong passion for sustainability planning. That role wasn't available when I was looking for jobs, so I that's on the back burner a little bit. But I think I also didn't know totally where I wanted to go, and I didn't find what I was really passionate about until I'd been in planning for a little while. So there's not as much pressure to find what your niche is as you might think.
Great.
I can chime in
One off
as
the top?
well. Yeah, sure. And I just wanted to say it might look different depending on if you just graduated from your undergrad versus graduating from your master's. Because I know for myself, after my undergrad, I took some time to work in various different positions before jumping into the workforce. And so that time kind of shaped all my various interests and passions, which is why I pursued my master's. And so from that perspective, I did go into my master's with specific goals and objectives and interests in mind. And while I didn't see myself working in a health authority per se, I'm able to bring in a lot of the passions and interests that I do have into the work I do. So I'm fortunate to be able to work on community health and wellness planning. And so while my interests were really around sustainability and climate change planning, I'm able to bring that in because, you know, from a social determinants of health perspective, everything impacts your health and wellness. And so certainly climate change is impacting First Nations communities. And so being able to be open to having those conversations at those meetings too, and thinking about all these other areas that perhaps previously weren't discussed in this specific health setting. So just, you know, thinking that even though I'm not specifically in a planning role with a title that I might have saw myself in, I'm able to still bring in that passion and interest and kind of knowledge and share that. So yeah.
Great. Thanks, Maya. That's fantastic. I've got another question here. I got a few of them. First off, let's go to Lewis. Lewis, you have your hand up. Or you did.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for presenting. I'm a current student right now. I'm doing the applied planning program at Langara. So as a student, and I'm hoping to pursue planning, I was wondering if the presenters could share, knowing what you know now in your careers, is there anything you wish you would have done more of or did differently during your graduate programs that maybe perhaps I could start doing now to plan for my career?
I can speak to that a little bit. I think when I was kind of halfway through planning school, that fatigue starts to set in as you have so many assignments and deadlines, and that networking event that your friends are going to might not be, that much of a priority for you because of all of the other competing deadlines and whatnot. And looking back, I kind of wish sometimes that I had have explored more areas of planning. I love my job. I love what area I'm working in now, but I think it would be fun to kind of see, I myself am not a transportation planner. However, one of my really good friends is, and just attending those events with her or getting that exposure to meet different folks in different areas of planning would have been, I think, a little bit fun, and helpful as well once you start looking at jobs and taking those skills into interviews and kind of connecting all those different pieces of planning. Like it is, even though we joke, there's the transportation planners, for example, are kind of their own special area of planning, and then the housing planners and the public space planners, like you work with them all and you are very collaborative in those processes. And so I think it's helpful, I think, when that fatigue starts to set in, to just find those kind of opportunities to keep learning.
That was very well said, Elsie. I just piggybacking, I agree with everything you said, and just wanted to highlight that there are so many synergies between these different sectors. And I think, as Elsie said so eloquently, having even just a understanding of each is very helpful as you go into your career.
That's great.
Another point.
Go ahead.
I would just add is there are so many incredible learning opportunities online now, whether it's on LinkedIn Learning or various webinars. And so, if there's a particular area of interest or a skill you want to develop, there are so many resources out there. So I would encourage you to look at those training sessions that might be available, so that when you're thinking and reflecting upon your skills, you are already a little bit familiar with that topic. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that there's a lot of great resources out there.
Picked up one of the other questions that I got here. It's a great question, Louis, and I want to thank you for joining from Langara. Currently, most of the schools in our area are sort of the full degree schools, and Langara's program is a fantastic program. And we are starting conversation to see what we can do to draw Langara and some of the other sort of more 2-year or certificate programs into our network here, because they're great teachers and great programs. So yeah, thanks for checking in on this. This is excellent. Interview questions. I'm gonna put in the chat here. So getting straight to that question of, do I know how to answer this question here? Because I think whoever it was, maybe Peyton said that your degree opens the door, but actually it's who you are that gets you the job and what you know and have done. Any advice for preparation for interview questions for the folks here with us?
Yeah, I've done a fair share of interviews in my time. I think I can answer this one. I think they're always going to ask you about how you manage workplace conflict, how you manage your deadlines, and how you're going to prioritize all of those deadlines. As Sam mentioned, if you're in municipal planning, which, maybe I come with some bias because that's where most of my job experience has been, you have at least 2 or 3 deadlines every week. Like you're always having to follow that schedule. So they really want to know how you're going to manage that. And it's not easy. If I'm being honest, managing all of those deadlines. I think there also one interview question I got tripped up on. I interviewed for a job with the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District, and they asked me what I loved about the regional district. And I genuinely did not have an answer for them. I kind of just did my best to answer their question, but I really encourage you. I did not get that job, by the way. I really encourage you to do a lot of research on the organization or municipality that you are interviewing for. I think maybe that goes without saying for private sector work, but even in the public sector, like you got to know who you're applying for. It's really important to know who is going to be in your interview and knowing, what they've been working on lately, what sort of projects the city's been doing, because that will be really helpful. So I learned my lesson, and when I got the job at the city, I made sure I spoke to, some like really exciting projects that had been ongoing. So yeah, they're always going to ask you conflict, working with deadlines, how you're going to prioritize all of your deadlines, and what projects have you excited about the organization that you're working for. I don't think they ask as many technical questions relating to like the LGA or anything like that as much, at least in my experience. It's more about who you are and how you're going to benefit the organization. But I'm really curious to hear what some of the girls in the private sector, what experience you've had in your interviews. That would be interesting to me.
Yeah, I can step in quickly first. I've had quite an array of interview styles in the private sector. I mean, one of my interviews was just coffee, and it was very informal, and it was just a conversation, essentially getting to know each other. And then I've had more formal conversations, but I find, a lot of public sector interviews are very points based. There's a scoring grid that they use. Whereas in private sector, it's a lot more, just really trying to get to know who you are and what your values are, specifically thinking about city spaces. That's a very important aspect for them. And so they really wanted to know how my values would align with their company and how I would fit in general. I think fit is a very big one for these groups. And so, yeah, it does vary quite a bit. And I think you'll see a wide array of interview styles for the private sector.
Yeah, I can speak to BC Housing. I've done now 4 interviews with BC Housing as I've moved through the different roles, and they're similar where it's kind of half of it is behavioral questions and kind of those, personality fit. How are you thinking about different situations? As Peyton mentioned, conflict, deadlines, all those kinds of things. If anyone's thinking of applying to BC Housing, they do let you know that they follow the STAR format, and there's information on the website. So depending on which job you're applying for, there might already be some kind of tips and tricks about the interview process available. And the bulk of the interview for my more current role as a development manager was, as Molly mentioned, kind of question by question, point by point, technical, really, what are you looking for when you're purchasing a site? What's on a title? What's all those kinds of things. And so very, very technical with that. So it seems like it really varies depending on the role. And I think what I typically did in my earlier career was just pulling up the organization's website and just pulling up the posting, running through it, and they'll say, for example, what skills they're looking for. And if you kind of put yourself in the shoes of the interviewer and like, why do they want to know, your work style and things like that, you can start to brainstorm what kind of questions they might ask you. But yeah.
Sam, any thoughts on interview questions?
I
Sam, you didn't
think-
have to do an interview. You did.
Yeah,
you
so I'm
basically
the
got
worst
locked into
person to speak to it. But I did have to do one for my sustainability internship. And I tried so hard on that job because I had just come off of 5 years of working in restaurants, and that summer I was determined to not be working in a restaurant. I'm going to get a planning internship. So I think Peyton, oh my gosh, she gave the perfect overall response to that. Maybe some specifics. I'll highlight that. Yeah, that question of why do you want to work here? What do you find inspiring about here? That's key. That's going to come up in every single one, I bet. I was definitely asked that. Familiarity with the major plans. You don't have to be reading through and being able to answer detailed questions, but understand the broad strokes of where plans and policy are going for a community. I mean, if you're going to work there, you're going to need to know that. So I highly recommend at least taking a quick review through that sort of thing. in terms of or two specifics that popped up for me, which was one question that I got is what's the difference between an OCP, a regional growth strategy, and a zoning bylaw? So they don't really like. I kind of share Peyton's assessment that you're not going to be tested too much on LGA, that kind of stuff, but that kind of base level planning knowledge can come up, and just being able to be comfortable and answer that sort of question is good. Elspie mentioned STAR. Definitely look that up. That is so good for making a positive impression and not freaking out during an interview as well, giving yourself some structure. And then the only other one, and this might be more kind of climate oriented, but we talked about like internal conflict management, but also how you respond to the public when they're conflict, like public oriented conflict management, like just understand how you would negotiate or resolve you not seeing, or the public not seeing eye to eye, and maybe just picture the most pushy person from the public attacking you, and how you diffuse that, and you'll be prepared for that. So thanks.
Yeah, the public. I thought they all got along with each other and all agreed, and we're always very nice to everybody.
I don't think we'd have jobs if that were the case.
Exactly. Exactly. Maya, did you have any other thoughts or comments you wanted to ask about the interview process? Your field is maybe a little different than some of the other ones here, a little unique, and has a different perspective or a different set of needs. What were some of your experiences?
Sure, yeah. I guess for anyone who might be interested in Indigenous planning, being prepared for questions around reconciliation, being prepared to a lot of like echoing what others have said, questions around just trying to get a sense of your personality and who you are, and trying to get a sense of some of those soft skills that you might bring, and previous experience working with First Nations communities. And also things like UNDRIP and DRIPA. And so being familiar with legislation as well, that can be brought up. And so you want to feel ready and prepared to speak to those. Other than that, it was a lot of kind of your standard interview questions, getting a sense of your previous experience and who you are. I did do an interview once for the city of Delta, and it threw a curveball for me because I wasn't expecting it. And there was a skill testing question that I was not prepared for. And so for those who may be interested in applying for municipal planning positions, there may be a round 2 of skill testing questions around zoning. And there was questions around square floor ratios, and to Sam's point about building a shed in the backyard, questions around that. And so doing your homework if you're applying to those kinds of specific positions as well can help.
Yeah, I definitely
go ahead. Sorry.
agree with Maya. I haven't had this experience, but I know some municipalities do a second round of what they call testing. And that's where they hand you the bylaw and they give you a set of questions and you have to go through the bylaw and answer them. I have not had that experience, but I know that that is pretty common in municipal planning, and it sounds like that was Maya's experience as well. So.
Yeah, I was going to quickly pop in and say a similar thing, Peyton. I have gone through a couple municipal interviews now, and I actually had an online assessment as a second round to the interview for one of the positions, and it was a Saturday morning. I had to give them an hour time frame when I was available. They sent me a sheet with instructions, and I had exactly 1 hour to write a briefing note on a development project or a proposal that was coming in. And so that was kind of a unique skill testing assessment, but it was doable, but very challenging in an hour.
For any of you who are listening, the reason why they're giving you those problems is that's exactly what you do. That's exactly what you do at your desk. Oh, I got to answer this. I got to figure that one out. I got to get through that. And if any of you who are ever dealing with FAR, as Maya raised, just a note, Oak Bay counts the square footage of gazebos and tool sheds in their action. Thank you, Molly. Appreciate the furrowed brow. Totally blew a project out of the water. I just got a heritage alteration permit for it. The plan checker missed it. Everybody missed it. Yep, they count the square footage of gazebos and tool sheds in their FAR. So, and verandas, everything goes in. Anything that's basically a wooden floor plate goes in the FAR. So for those of you who aren't involved in that, that is a really weird one to deal with. Hopefully you won't have to deal with that. Let's see, we got another question. You've all mentioned kind of moving around a little bit in your jobs. What was that? You've mentioned it a little bit, but maybe a few extra thoughts. What was that kind of experience like in your first year or two? Obviously, COVID, kicked the chair out from behind a few of you, and you had to quickly find your footing in something else. But that kind of moving around, did you leave them voluntarily for a better opportunity? Did they generally come to an end and another one opportunity? Did you have kind of mentors within the organization that said, "Oh, now we need to get you over here. Here's an opportunity"? What was that experience like those first sort of couple of years or even months as you're kind of moving around?
Yeah, I'll quickly jump in here. One of my points from my introduction was that I had to advocate for myself in order to get the opportunities that I've had. And I think specifically for me, when I think about going from a development coordinator to a development manager, with the company I'm at, we are quite small. Everyone is really busy, including leadership. And so it's really up to you to advocate for yourself and get those promotions. And so there came a natural point where I had just evolved from the development coordinator to development manager. And unfortunately, leadership was just super busy. And although they recognized the value that I was bringing in, it wasn't first on their priority necessarily to make that title switch. And so, I had to have a conversation with the leadership team, and I just showed, the work that I was doing, and it was equal to a development manager. And so through that, I was able to get the promotion and continue as a development manager today. So it was actually myself advocating for me, and sometimes that's the way it goes, and you have to do that.
Good. Thanks, Molly. So you moved around quite a bit. What was your experience in BC Housing?
I feel like a mix of everything. When I moved from the admin coordinator to the senior project officer role, that is, I think, the biggest shift that I've had to take myself, going from kind of sitting in and coordinating meetings through to actually leading them and delivering projects. And you kind of start to doubt yourself sometimes, are you ready to do this? Are you ready to make that jump? And I had a really fantastic mentor that she was one of the directors that I was working with, and she was like, you should do this, you should apply. And she was the one that really encouraged me and kind of helped facilitate that. And then kind of on the flip side, when I was ready to move into the development manager role, similar to Molly, it's like, okay, I can do this, and I know that I can, and advocating for yourself, and just there's never really a good time. I think a lot of people are busy, and it's really just kind of up to you to make those steps. But I think being internal has really helped, and getting a sense of the organization and how we deliver projects at BC Housing is very different to how other organizations deliver projects. And so they call it the homegrown method over here, where you start to see the organization through different roles and different positions and get to know how the work's delivered that way. So I'd say a mix of everything, a mix of having great mentors, being encouraged to take those next steps, and then also finding that confidence in yourself. And I think that comes as you kind of progress through your career. I think when you're earlier on, it can be daunting to advocate for yourself, but once you work through that and you're like, I've shown that I have these skills and I've delivered XYZ, it becomes, I think, a little easier as you become more tenured, I'd say.
That's great. Thanks, Lee. Maya, you were going to offer a comment.
Yeah, I was just going to share that when I first started off, I started off on a contract position. And so going into the role, I knew that it wasn't going to be my forever job. And so I wanted to take that opportunity to see and learn as much as I could about the organization and about what I'm interested in as a planner, and start building a bunch of relationships and networking. And it's through that kind of process that and working in close connection with the team that I currently work for, that I was encouraged to apply to a position that was open on their team.
It's interesting. A number of you said here, sort of an opening comes up and you sort of face this question of confidence. Am I ready? Should I go for it? You know, at a certain point, Molly, as you articulated, it's really clear, hey guys, I'm doing this already. So, you know, let's do this. But it's interesting that role of having a mentor, having someone around that says, hey, you really should do this. You should push for that. How important that building that trust with the people around you is.
The only other comment I would have on top of what everyone else has said is apply for jobs even if you're not fully qualified for them. Because you don't know who else has applied. And who knows, maybe that manager has heard of you before. Planning, no matter if you're in private or public sector, is very small world. Everybody knows everybody. You know, that's kind of how we all ended up here today. So chances are someone's heard of you. And that could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing, but just know your reputation follows you around, and it's okay to apply for jobs even if you're not qualified. I think shows you're interested. Worst thing that can happen is you don't get it.
Yeah, and beyond even like that, applying for jobs that you're not qualified for, the planning job market right now is very favorable for applicants. There is a large number of vacant positions across municipalities. In terms of like, you know, we have a mat leave position here at the city. It's Planner 3 that's been open for months and months and months, right? And in a lot of these cases, perhaps like even bringing on a Planner 1 adds capacity in a meaningful way that of keeping it vacant and searching for months and months more for a fully qualified Planner 3, you know, would be preferable over that. So there's also the possibility you might not get that job that's advertised, but that these postings indicate opportunities of other kinds as well, potentially.
Question here just about it had been put forward to the municipal staff, but let me just ask it of all of you in fairly short description. What's an average day include for you? What are you doing? What are you doing on any given day?
A lot of emails, a lot of meetings, I would say, and site visits from now here and there as well. But I'd say the bulk of my day is probably emails.
And emails about what? I'll tell you what are you sort of what's in play?
I think everything as a development manager. I'm curious actually to hear about Molly in the private sector, but you're coordinating a lot of different pieces. So I'm liaising with our operations team on the operating budgets, and then I'm working with the capital budgets, and I'm connecting with our development consultants on where's the project at? Are we submitting building permit this week, next week? What do we need to get there? And from there, linking all the different pieces, which I personally love. I love the puzzle pieces and the critical thinking that goes into it. But it's constant, I'd say emails of, hey, where's this, where's that? And then liaising between folks and hopping on Teams calls and chatting through it and updates and construction meetings and yeah, all that kind of good stuff.
To make sure you're talking to the right consulting team for the right project.
Yes, yeah, talking a lot about
you've got
salty
12
water.
projects. That's like you've probably got about 100 people in your network at that point, and they're not all the same ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say day to day is it's so different, and I think that's what I love about my role, and I'm sure Elsabie's is the same. As you said, it's about the puzzle and it's about problem solving. Completely depends what projects I'm on and what stage they're at. You know, we have feasibility through concept, through tender, construction, and then closeout, and so you know, depending where you are, you have new problems to solve. And, you know, it can be the contractor calling you because they want to dump soil on the school district's yard and they can't do that. Or it's, you know, a federal funder saying that they found $5 million for your project. It varies depending on the day, and it's really fun and it's very fast paced and exciting. So, yeah.
That's great.
For myself, it varies, depends on day to day as well. I would say 50% of my work is community facing. So I do a lot of traveling in my position, visiting the First Nations communities and directly supporting with planning efforts and the development of community health and wellness plans, as well as facilitating engagement sessions with their community members and leadership. So that I would say that's about 50% of my work. And then the other 50 is more of the back end internal work, office setting, at home setting, kind of similar to what Elsabe was mentioning, a lot of emails as well and coordination.
Sam and Peyton are both working in municipalities, but probably not necessarily doing exactly the same things. What's a typical day in your life include?
Yeah, I could start us off maybe. So my position's a little interesting because I came in as a planner 1, right as my previous internship supervisor as a planner 3 went on mat leave. And so my role right now is split pretty 50-50, maybe 75-25 in favor of long range planning versus your current planning, like signed permit applications, development variance permits, minor development permits. But the short story is emails is most of my day as well. And that it varies. So I'm not saying anything new, I suppose. But in terms of long range planning, that's kind of coordinating with the consultants, making sure we're on budget, making sure that when we get draft materials back, I'm distributing them from staff. I'm communicating with staff deadlines and when we can get that back, and ensuring we're staying on time and ensuring that I'm emailing the right consultant, because we can be doing multiple projects with the same one, and that can mess up them and us. But and then on the other side, kind of current planning that can be just responding to inquiries like the sheds thing that I mentioned, but also just walking through applications, writing council reports, having team discussion meetings where you're bringing your inquiries every week to discuss them as a team. And that's probably one of my favorite parts of the job, actually, is being able to sit in those meetings and like kind of have, in some ways municipalities we're in the trenches of planning, as some of them will say, and kind of getting to see how we apply that kind of stuff and how we interpret zoning bylaws and implement them is actually really cool in these meetings. That interview like sort of thing of, here's this zoning bylaw and here's this development, apply it, in some ways sounds like a nightmare to me, because once you get into these kinds of things, there's so much interpretation and, okay, well, what was the intent of this, and does that match the intent? And so with zero context, having to apply it, what a nightmare. Thanks.
Great. Good.
Yeah, I can see Andrew's question there in the chat. So when I was a planning technician or a planning assistant, most of my job was doing development variance permits and board of variance applications. Looking at sign permits was another one, and business licensing. And then, of course, as Sam mentioned, 1 billion inquiries a day. So that's on the phone, at the front counter, or via email. We also handled all of the referrals for the planner. So referring projects to local First Nations or the health authorities, and also our community associations. We'd also get to look at some cool projects. And when I was a planning assistant, we looked at the upcoming end of land use contracts. So that's something we're looking at right now. And I was also doing some research for our street entertainers bylaw. So I got to do a bunch of cool stuff when I was a planning assistant. And then when I moved up to be a planner, that's when you kind of get to do a lot of the fun stuff, I find. Big development permits, rezoning applications, you're doing council reports, you're making presentations to city council, and you are really all of your work is mostly based off of what that council has deemed as a council priority for their term. So that kind of dictates what you have to work on. But it can be also things like bylaw reviews, facilitating public hearings, and presenting those types of materials to the public. So I really like it. I also like public speaking. I'm like one of those weird people that likes that. So I find that the planner job offers a lot more opportunity to do that. I've also done some really cool presentations to like the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board, and I get to do things like this, like sit on the panel and answer questions. So I agree that there's tons of emails, but I think I'm looking more so at things that like Elsa B and Molly are sending to the planning department for review for bylaw compliance, and you get to meet them on site and talk about the project. So it's really busy, but for me, I don't think it's mostly emails. I think it's a lot of collaboration and a lot of meetings, but I really like that part of the job. So.
That's great. We've got just a few minutes left. Let me just ask one general quick question. We don't have to go down the rabbit hole on anything, but if you had been taught one other thing or a couple extra things in school that really would have helped you in the first part of your career, what would they be? And obviously the corollary of that, if PIBC or other orgs offered something like that here early in your career, what kind of courses, what kind of training would really have been of help, if there was anything that sort of came to mind? It's hard to remember back. If you've been in business, if you've been learning for a while, you forget what you didn't know.
I've been out of school for just under 2 years now. And I think, speaking specifically about UMBC, and I think Sam will probably agree, a lot of our classwork is focused on long range planning and not so much current planning. So I can't speak to what any of the other programs are like. Of course, I didn't attend those schools, but long range planning is great. But if you are going to go work in a big municipality, you don't get to do long range planning and current planning at the same time. You work with someone else in another department who does that, generally speaking. And so making sure you have an understanding of the difference between long range planning and current planning. I wish that I had had more of that when I was in school. And I think I leaned on those political science courses to get that knowledge. So that would be, I think, one thing I wish I had known a little bit more about.
Just for clarity for everyone listening, current planning is generally development approvals related. Inquiries, it's really permit oriented. Long range planning is more policy oriented. So current planning implements the long range plans in their reviews of applications and things like that. But that's, if you're not used to those two terms, that's what that means.
Thanks, Mark.
Those of you, if you, everybody else, well, just one or two things you wish you'd maybe learned a little bit more that would have made that transition easier?
Yeah, I think when I think about housing specifically, we had a great law course at VIU, but we didn't really get into the housing agreements or legal mechanisms related to housing. And I think that was a gap when I moved into my career.
Yeah. Housing agreements, they're a thing.
Yeah, and just to, reiterate, yeah, everything Peyton said there, certainly, like, yeah, from a UNBC perspective, there's always that question of, oh, what's the purpose of a school? Is it to, to teach you to learn and be able to learn, that kind of thing, or is it to directly set you up with the skills you'll need in your career? But I do feel like, yeah, there was a big focus on long range, and in terms of those, I think I said in my introduction, in terms of like that bylaw interpretation, being able to get comfortable with that kind of wording, interpretation, and application, could definitely brush up on that in terms of that being part of the curriculum. And there's one last thing, but I think I've lost it, and like this train of thought is completely derailed at this point, so I'll leave her there.
Maya, any thoughts of one or two things you wish you learned?
Sure, yeah. The SFU master's program is a little unique. It's got a heavy emphasis on resource management and environmental planning. And so without the undergrad in planning, there isn't a lot of coursework actually on like a lot of planning 101 that you might receive at other schools. And so things like zoning and bylaws, there isn't a lot of exploration on those topics. And so if you're interested in municipal planning and getting into that work, yeah, there'll be some outside of school research required, I would say.
That's great. You did highlight the difference. The schools are all a bit different. SFU being the most specifically focused and much larger environmental and that kind of policy and that big picture kind of planning and stuff, as opposed to local government and the administration of plans. Elsavi, take us home on this one. What are your reflections?
Oh boy, because I don't know. So I don't know if I'm the best person to close it out. But I've heard kind of through just industry chatter, SCARP has a reputation for I think having a really strong emphasis on soft skills and maybe less so on the technical kind of skills. But then when I think of, you know, me and my group of friends from school, we're doing very different roles, and I don't know how you would meet the needs of each of those through a course. And so the answer is kind of, I don't know. I think you do a lot of learning on the job based on where you end up and being okay with that kind of uncomfortability sometimes. But I will say, I think maybe software is one that I wish I learned a little bit more about. We had a GIS course, but it was just for one semester. And I think that those kinds of things, not necessarily getting to the level of design software that architects use, but even just kind of working knowledge courses would have been really helpful. I myself don't use them at all in my job. However, sometimes you're wanting to articulate an idea and you don't know how to do that. And so sometimes I have to like draw a house on like Microsoft Paint and then point at what I'm trying to do. And I feel like it would just be a little bit easier if I had some software skills to back me up on that. But all of that to kind of say the planning roles that you end up in, although similar, are different and they have their different skills. And you can only learn so much during school. And a lot of that really will be how you position yourself early on in your career and what opportunities you say yes to, and kind of all those pieces to it as well.
Well said. Thank you all. We're exactly at 1:30 by my clock. This was really, really valuable. You took an hour and a half out of your very busy day and your dozens and dozens of projects. Really appreciate this. Very interesting how you're each working in somewhat similar, but interestingly quite different fields in different parts of BC. A lot of very interesting similarities and a few differences, and I won't try and sum them all up here in the time, but really appreciate you taking the time to come and give some advice, give some perspectives back to your colleagues from the schools going forward. And we had a good link with Langara here. We'll see if we can draw them more in. So thank you very much. Really appreciate this. Everybody feel fine with connecting. If you want connections, let me know. You can get connected with me and I'll try and see if we can get folks connected if you want to pick up another conversation and build your network. Okay. Thank you all very much. Have a great rest of the week. Cheers. Talk
Thank
soon.
you so much. Bye.
Nice to meet all of you.
Thank you.